definitely not the least, we have Liyuna. So this summer, Liyuna worked on the gesture control robot. And as you guys saw previously, the gesture control robot is a pretty intense project, and it has a lot of moving parts. But I think one thing that really defined Liyuna was her ability to stay calm in the eye of the storm, which is the gesture control robot. So I remember one time I was just doing a routine little walk around the classroom, and I saw Liyuna just like working on her project, so I just went up to her, I was like, hey Liyuna, how's it going? And she was like, oh, nothing works, like, the motor doesn't work, the battery don't work, this doesn't work. I was like, I did not see that on her face at all, but she's like, okay, I'll figure it out. And I think that really encapsulates Liyuna as an engineer. She knows to stay patient, and being patient is really the key in really taking on a project like this. And I think she really did a great job, and she came out with a really, very cool project in the end. So I give it up for our last student.
Hi, my name is Liyuna. I go to Basis Independent Silicon Valley, and my project is the gesture control robot. It works by having an accelerometer on the controller, which then it finds the gestures and then communicates them to the robot using the HCO5 Bluetooth module. I did a total of 4 modifications to my base project. The first one was a spin feature, which works by having a memory which remembers the last 4 gestures, and if they form a circle and the right gestures, it will do a 360 turn. The second modification I added was similar to the first modification because it also used the memory, but instead it replays the last 4 gestures if I press the button. The third modification I added was an ultrasonic sensor which acts as a collision preventer, and the last modification I added was to control the speed using how steep the tilt was. So I'll do a demo now. As you can see, if I tilt the control forward, it should move forward. If I move it back, it moves back. It's not really working now, so I'll use a demo video. As you can see, if I tilt the control forward, the robot moves forward. And here I have a bottle, so when it came in contact within like 20 centimeters, it moves back. And I also have the button, which goes in a circle and repeats the previous gesture. While building my project, I faced a number of challenges, with the main 3 being with the Bluetooth, detecting the circle, and wiring my ultrasonic sensor. The first challenge I faced was in my base project with the Bluetooth. For the Bluetooth to work, I had to configure one module as the master and the other as the slave. This was challenging because there was a number of things that could go wrong, but I found that the issue with mine was that I wired some things wrong. This was important because that's how data is transmitted and received. The second challenge I faced was with detecting the circle. This was difficult because the accelerometer couldn't detect a circle, so I had to add a memory for it to work. However, this was hard to control, so I also added a button. The last challenge I faced was with wiring my ultrasonic sensor. This was difficult because the Arduino Uno only has one 5-volt pin, which I was using for my HCO5 Bluetooth module. However, after doing some research, I learned that I could use the 3.3-volt pin for the HCO5, and I could rewire things so that I could power both components. I also learned a lot of things here at Bluestamp. The first thing I learned was a lot about my Arduinos and what each of their pins mean. For example, I learned that the RX and TX pins are for transmitting and receiving data, and how each of the power pins work. I also learned about what each of my components do as I tested them separately. I also learned about coding in C++. Besides basic syntax, I learned a lot about using the serial monitor, and because my project uses Bluetooth, it was a little more complicated, so I was able to use the serial monitor to debug and control it manually. I also learned about using libraries to simplify my code and to how do you add a memory using buffers, arrays, and the modulus operator. Finally, if I had more time, I would add an LED light to indicate battery level and voice option so that it would the robot would do whatever was dictated. Thank you. Any questions? Yeah.
How exactly did you store the memory from past controls that you've done to then like tell your robot when to do like the extra modification, like 360?
So I added like a buffer and an array for the last 4 gestures, and then I had the button so that if you press the button, then it replays last 4 gestures.
Oh.
Yeah.
What happens if you tilt it like equally in 2 directions, or how does it decide which way it should go, or does it go?
I try to keep it like 90 degrees. Yeah. Yeah.
How do you actually detect like a circle motion? I guess, but what is
So
that?
I also added a memory, so if it goes like forward, left, and then back and